Right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rasprg Research Analysis of Standardization Process Research Group. We made breakfast all for you, so lucky you, the ones that are in the room. Sorry about the ones that are remote. Apologies for the confusion with the scheduling of the session, which has quite a bit of conflict with a few other sessions. So anyhow, let's get started. With the note well, as most of you know, the IETF follows the Ietf Intellectual Property Rights Disclosure Rules, and by participating here, you agree to follow all the IETF process and policies. If you are aware of any IETF contribution that is covered by patents or patent applications, owned or controlled by your sponsor, you must disclose it. The IETF expects that you file such IPR disclosures in a timely manner. The IETF prefers that most liberal licensing terms possible are made available, and definitive information is available in the appropriate RFCs, which you can see in the slides, which are in the slide deck. Everything is recorded in audio and video. We make routine recordings. If you are not wearing the red thingy, you are agreeing to be recorded, and everything that you say here will be recorded and will be made publicly available. So please be aware. We also have a privacy and code of conduct. You agree to acknowledge that all written audio, video, and photographic records of meetings will be may be made publicly available. All the personal information that you provide to the IETF will be handled according with our policy, which you can see online. And as a participant or attendee, you agree to work respectfully with other participants, so please do so. And if you have any issues, you can reach to the Unbounds team. And we also have appropriate RFCs dealing with that. So if there are any issues on this front, please check it. The goals of the IETF, differently from the IETF, is to conduct research. The IETF is not a standards development organization. And like with all the other cases, you can see the appropriate RFCs going into detail into this. Rasprg. So the goal of Rasprg is understanding the standardization processes via evidence-based reproducible work. The outputs are joint reports, papers, tools, data, open source software. The goal is not to make hierarchical comparisons between SDOs or directly influence IETF operations, though if anything from here is useful for IETF operations or for understanding relationships between SDOs, anyone is more than welcome to use it. Your friendly chairs are Alvaro Retana and Ignacio Castro, myself, and the charter, like any other IETF research group, is available online. And that's the welcome. Simple rules, please. If you are in the room, scan the QR code. Use Meet Echo for the Q&A. For the speakers, please try to get ready during the Q&A of the previous person. And the most fun task of the session is note-taking. Any volunteer that would be willing, we have free breakfast for the volunteers for note-taking. Not everybody at the same time, please. We cannot move on if we don't have a note-taker. Okay, thank you for the overwhelming support. So note-taking will be done by AI. All right. So we have an exciting agenda for today. We have first Jeffrey Ding from George Washington University, who will be talking about the US-China economic interdependence. Has not declined, it has standardized. Then we will have Brian Newfold from Blue Sky talking about interoperation in the AT protocol ecosystem. Maybe some of you saw him yesterday in the site meeting. And we will wrap up with Karim Atumani Mohammed from ISOC Comoros with Mapping the Gap, Quantifying Barriers to African Participation in IETF Standardization. So without further ado, Jeffrey, if you can come. Slides. What am I doing wrong here?
I don't know.
I'm getting confused.
You want me to do it? Because I think you're going into.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for being here. I think I have maybe two strikes going against me to give this presentation. One is I'm a complete first-time participant here at the Ietf, and two is I'm a political scientist, so not a technical expert by any means, but I'm really excited by the opportunity to present this work and mostly want to save as much time for feedback and questions to get everyone's thoughts on this topic. So my research question is really a political science international relations question, but I'm trying to use data from the Ietf to try to answer this question. And so it's a simple descriptive question, which is economic interdependence between the US and China increasing or decreasing? And so I think if you just read the news headlines and the narratives, it's very much yes, technology decoupling is underway. There's this bifurcation of the technology system. This is from one of the top international relations journals at the bottom, that screenshot from my field, people trying to understand the standard setting ecosystem, some of the best scholars. And I think what I've learned is they've misunderstood a lot of the key processes just from attending this meeting. But the conventional wisdom is that there's going to be this splinter net of sorts into a Western-based system and an Eastern-based system based on Chinese standards. And so this is what I'm trying to test and argue against in a sense. Why do we care about economic interdependence? So the first quote there is from famous British pacifist Norman Angell. And he's writing before World War I saying, what is one of the biggest roadblocks to war? One of the biggest things that leads to peace is promoting economic interdependence between great powers. And so usually we think of economic interdependence through this lens of two people on the same boat, right? So if you're dependent on each other to row and bail water, there's no way you can fight against each other. I think what I'm presenting today is a little bit of a different framework, which is imagining the two people not as individual people, but as boat owners. And they contribute towards infrastructure as a public good. So they are both contributing towards maintaining a lighthouse, and that prevents all boats from sinking. And I think this process is a little bit more similar to the idea of what work at the Ietf is like, standards that form this essential infrastructure for the global economy on which all powers rely on. Okay, so the data is gathering 3,555 RFCs from 2010 to 2024. And then the main effort was, as Ignacio knows and was discussed yesterday at the workshop, the other IRT, the Applied Networking workshop, the difficult part is confirming the affiliations. And so going through so a lot of people affiliate as individuals or unaffiliated or as one-person consultancies, and then matching the organization affiliations to that organization's country headquarters based off of LinkedIn, Crunchbase, some of these other databases. And so you end up with 10,444 rows of individuals who are co-authors to RFCs. And then the idea is to analyze how this network has evolved over time to try to answer this question, is US-China economic interdependence increasing or decreasing over time? So that's the main data I'll be presenting today. I'll do a very quick at the end, some snapshots of some case studies I've done in other standard setting efforts in trusted computing, in Wi-Fi, and some of these other technology domains. So this is the visualization of the social network of co-authors on IETF stream RFCs throughout these 2 periods. So the darker blue are RFC authors affiliated with organizations headquartered in China. So if you work for FutureWay, you're coded as dark blue. If you work for Cisco in Europe, you're coded as light blue for the US. I know this goes against some of the stuff in terms of co-authors representing themselves as individuals, not as connected to their companies, but for the purposes of this analysis, that's the decision that was made. And so it's hard to tell. Maybe you can see just from the visualization that you're starting to see more Chinese companies become central to this network over time. You can measure the edge betweenness of certain edges. And what that means is if you wanted to connect 2 different nodes from this network, the shortest path between them, does it go through this edge? And an edge is a co-authorship relationship. And so I calculated the edge betweenness of all US-China edges. And so in the first graph, that accounts for 8% of the total edge betweenness of the network. In the second graph, it jumps up to 12%. And so that's just some descriptive data to show that there does seem to be more economic interdependence for within the IETF over time. So we can get some more detailed data on the centrality of Chinese headquartered organizations in the IETF over time. And so these are some of the main, this is based off of network analysis methodology. These are some of the main centrality measures. Betweenness is basically to what extent do these actors broker and connect different communities in the IETF. Degree is just how many total connections, how many total edges and connections and collaborations are connected to particular nodes. And then the one where centrality has decreased is eigenvector centrality, and that's more the extent to which these nodes are connected to the most popular nodes in the network. So this weights it by which types of other co-authors you're connected with. So a little bit of a mixed bag, but the overall picture confirms the previous slide, which is that it does seem like IETF contributors from Chinese organizations it's not just, I think there's been a lot of great previous work that shows there's more on the affiliation side from Chinese organizations. I think this is showing it's not just Chinese organizations collaborating and co-authoring with each other, but that there's more of these cross-border collaborations and they've become more central from a network analysis perspective. So again, this is very early stage research, and this is a very simple ERGM model, which basically just measures based on a certain attribute of a co-author, does that make them more likely to collaborate with each other? And so some of these findings are obvious, which is the node match on the coefficient on the affiliation, that being statistically significant and positive just means if you're from the same organization, you're more likely to collaborate with someone from the same organization, same company, the same university. What was interesting is there's a lot of concern about maybe block voting in the IETF or other standards development organizations, companies from the same country only collaborating with each other. We actually don't see that from this 15-year time span of data where people from the same country headquarters from the industry affiliation side, there's no evidence to show that they collaborate more frequently with each other. Again, very early stage, and this is the most basic version of the model. Okay, so I'll close with just a few small snippets from the case studies I've done. One of the cases that I'm looking at is obviously the new IP case that sparked a lot of debate and controversy. Big Financial Times article that became pretty widespread, this idea that the new IP proposal from Huawei would splinter the internet. Yet we didn't see that happening, I think in part because the IETF, not the ITUT, is still the most focal organization for setting standards in this space. We see Huawei reframe the new IP proposal, and other scholars have concluded that China has grown increasingly accepting of this industry-led bottom-up approach like the Ietf. And I think we see that from the RFC data. And just quick snippets from other fields and other standards development organizations. I looked at the Trusted Computing Group. It's more of an industry association membership organization than something like the Ietf, but it does show that over time we're actually not seeing splintering and fracturing. Some of this is showing that there does seem to be more economic interdependence between the US and China being in the same boat when it comes to setting standards on trusted computing. And so interviewing senior cybersecurity experts at companies involved with the TCG, showing that similar trends are happening in other standards development organizations where you have Chinese companies becoming more invested in the global interoperable standard. Thanks. The Wi-Fi WAPI case is pretty famous in this space as well, so I won't go through it too much in depth, but essentially here China is trying to promote a homegrown standard, but over time you see Chinese companies becoming increasingly committed to Wi-Fi, specifically through this focal standards organization of the IEEE 802.11, which is actually meeting here in Madrid right after the IETF meeting. And so part of the reason for that is the legitimacy of these types of standards development organizations being supported by openness and transparency. And so they become the focal organization to set standards in the space. And we see similar, I need to learn more about this body. So I just looked at affiliation data for this, but it shows that you're seeing more Chinese voting members and more interdependence in the 802.11 space as well. Okay, thanks for bearing with very early stage rough draft, a little bit something kind of different. And the main takeaway is I think it's easy to see decoupling everywhere, but in sort of the essential infrastructure that undergirds the global economy, US-China interdependence may actually be strengthening if you, based on some of the data and analysis I presented today. But yeah, this is very early stage. Next steps is talking to more people, much more plugged into these different standards organizations than myself, learning more. And I think I'm trying to explore whether these trends also travel to open source software foundations as well. So looking forward to questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. Any questions from the room?
Hi, Jeffrey. Thank you for the presentation. Alvaro Retana, I work at FutureWay. You started by saying that, by showing some of the reports that have been in the press and, things like that. And you said that based on some of the things that you have seen this week, that if people had maybe a better understanding of the work of the IETF, maybe they would have had a different point of view or a different opinion or a different way of looking at things. I'm interested to learn what kinds of things you have seen. I'm assuming, is this your first IETF?
Yes,
Yes. So what kinds of things have you seen? How do you think maybe we could, as the IETF, do things not differently, but get the word out maybe a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I think what I meant by that was in the political science, international relations, Financial Times reporting type literature about the geopolitics standard setting, I think there's this idea that if a country really wants to influence standard setting for their own purposes, they can pretty easily co-opt an organization like the IETF. And I think at least just from my limited, 4 or 5 days here, I think that is very hard to do for any country, whether it's China, US, and so that's what I meant from it in terms of just the deference to technical authority, the complete openness. Obviously, I think there's a lot of concerns about centralization and corporate influence. It's not like a perfect body, but those were the types of processes that I was thinking about. Yeah.
Carolina?
Sure.
Hi, this is Carolina from Oxford Information Labs. Thank you for that presentation. So I've actually done a bit of research on the new IP proposal and written some pieces of work myself on it. So I'm actually excited to come across someone else that's looking into these questions and issues. I wanted to offer some sort of I guess, reactions to the way you characterize the academic literature on the splinternet. I think the arguments that were being made were around the proposal that was presented to the ITU, and I think that posed a very sort of concrete risk. The proposal was what it was. It was, sort of a vision for an alternative internet, if you will. And I think if you speak to some of the scholars that pose that notion of the sort of the threat of the splinternet, they will tell you that their vision for countering that was precisely taking some of those proposals to spaces like the Ietf. So in that regard, I think what you're finding is quite exciting. That a lot of sort of the streams related to that original sort of new IP proposal are coming to the IETF, are getting properly vetted, and are getting other people on board beyond perhaps the original proponents, and sort of evolving as sort of stronger proposals that are more aligned with the current internet infrastructure, if that makes sense. So I think there's a bit more nuance to that case, and I'm happy to have a chat with you on that. I did have a question also about one of your graphs. I'm also a political scientist, and I almost think you're taking a long leap looking at just affiliations and using that to assert that there's interdependence between the US and countries like China, or other countries you could argue, or among whatever countries you pick. So I'd like to sort of understand, am I understanding that correctly, that that's how you're deriving that sort of conclusion? To me, that feels like it's long leap. You need more data to be able to say there's that dependency. So yeah, those are two thoughts to share. Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you. I fully take your point. Number one, there needs to be more nuance in terms of what the actual threat of the splinternet was from new IP. I think there's debate about that, but I've read, I think, your colleagues' work, Stacy Hoffman, Oxford Information Labs, on standardizing the splinternet. And so I would love to get more of your thoughts on that offline. On point number two, I think part of the answer is just, I'm trying to map sort of international economic relationships onto a body where people are not necessarily representing their like economic interests of a country. And so affiliations is just the best we have to get at it, in terms of maybe an alternative would be to not look at the headquarters, but just where the subsidiary is based. And so here, as I mentioned, all subsidiaries get coded back to the country headquarters. But yeah, affiliations is imperfect, but I think it was the one of the only ways to do it. Yeah, I think there is still some distance between that and economic interdependence.
Yeah, if I can very quickly add, you may want to look at deployment or adoption also as a sign of, that interdependency actually at play. I think that will be more effective. It's challenging though, but I'm happy to chat about that too as well.
Yeah, I would welcome all ideas.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
I got in the queue, I think, for the Carola's second point specifically. I see like RFC co-authorships, technical interconnections we can still make, but calling it economic relationship is, I would say that, yeah, it's a big leap and going there. In fact, when you talk to people and informally chat with people and ask people how folks becomes co-authors, and you will hear very different side of stories. It's rarely would be anybody talking about economics in that relationship, like why I ask somebody else to co-author or support for ideas. So while you're looking at it from the angle of data, it might also be a good idea to talk to people and figure it out. And that will give you a good understanding of when we say that's a big leap, why it's a big leap, because you will not hear back when you are trying to get those answers talking one-to-one to folks. Just my suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, Dhruv, yes. Thank you. I think I'm trying to talk to a lot of people here, so please, if you're interested in talking, I would love to talk and learn more. So Ignacio, are you able to go back to the lighthouse slide? So I think your question and Carolina's is getting at something that I just want to clarify a little bit, why I talk about co-authorship. So I think the idea here is the question I'm trying to answer with economic interdependence are the US and China becoming more invested in supporting something like lighthouse standards? And that's what the co-authorship, obviously it's individuals, sometimes maybe there's some author shopping going around, but at the end of the day, are US and Chinese companies becoming more invested in building the same lighthouse and the same infrastructure that's undergirding the Wi-Fi ecosystem or the trusted computing ecosystem or the internet ecosystem?
Just one secondary point. So don't stop at just the standard part. You have to also say, like, how are they getting deployed? Are they going deployed at this for the same reasons? Are we building lighthouse for the right reason? Because we do building blocks at Ietf, and those building blocks can be used in various different ways, and people using them might have different ideas of what they want to do. So it needs the next step as well, not just looking at the standards authorship.
Yes, thanks.
Sorry, and just to add, and also commercial incentives. Don't forget about that, because I think that's a big part of the picture as well.
Hi, Jean-François from the AO Foundation. Thanks for the presentation. Pleasantly surprised that you were looking into the topic. There was, however, one of the assertions that you made that I would like to double check. You were mentioning that you didn't see any specific correlation about favoring certain groups of companies working more with themselves, let's say. That would enter in contradiction with what the Ignacio, for instance, presented 2-3 IGFs ago.
That's correct, but that was restricted to a very specific subset of time, which, to be frank, I don't remember exactly which years.
Okay.
So it could be that it's different years here, but.
Okay, because I remember that that you had this heat map about who had been collaborating more with whom, and Huawei was basically the extremely red in the graph. And so
with China Telecom, and yeah, it was for a subset of years. And to be frank, I don't remember the year, so it could be that they. Okay,
so we would need to revisit that to see how it correlates. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Ignacio's paper, I think both can be I think mine is less granular than that. I think mine could miss some of these more specific trends. Like I think it was Huawei and China Mobile often collaborate with each other. And so the ERGM there is across all countries. So I could look at specific countries as well. I need to brush up on my network analysis to do that, but it might be that some of the country-specific trends are being washed away because it's looking at the whole data set of all countries and all companies. So yeah, that's something to double check.
And if I may, are you also looking into who may have been throwing more money at participation in those environments to see who's putting more resources, plus a bit of a comparison between the different national policies that they may have towards standardization? China has a very, very clear public national policy on what is their position on technical standards, and they have made very clear what is their interest on having a lot of presence all over the place. And if you are comparing between places such as the IETF and the ITU, you just have to look at the numbers of delegates that the China's delegation had in WTSA back in New Delhi last year, which was overwhelming compared to anybody else. And then apart, the amount of people they had back home as well participating remotely, which is, I don't know of any other country that at the moment has any capacity to compete with that, or is intending to have that competition going.
Yeah, I think this is an important point. I think what I'll just, because I've studied like the standardization 2035 policy, and there's a lot of work on this subject. I think what's interesting here is it's not necessarily that relevant to the question is China or whatever country becoming more invested in the focal standards development organizations to set globally interoperable standards that we all think are like the best technology wins out. And the question is, are they going here or trying to set up a separate go-it-alone architecture like with the new IP? And I think my argument is countries are almost, you almost have to come to the IETF. You almost have to bring the best ideas and contributions to the IETF. And that might lead to more economic interdependence.
Great. We have Simon Hicks online or on the room.
Thank you. I'm in the room. Simon Hicks, Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, United Kingdom Government. So a couple of points, please. Firstly, I would note that states certainly have people who understand how standards works. From the UK, we have 3 of us in this room at the moment. Yes, you will sometimes hear political statements that talk about leadership and control from many states. But I think virtually every major state in the world has people in their system who understand how the standard system actually works. Which brings me to the second point. Lighthouse standards rarely exist, I would suggest. Maybe more so in other SDOs away from IETF, but we talk about the consensus principle. Because if all the parties in the market don't agree, a standard won't work, basically. And that's a fundamental of the market. And yes, some or a limited number of big companies can grasp a standard, but eventually it's got to work for everybody, because if it doesn't, it simply won't go. You know, there are many examples of apparently good standards that have fallen by the wayside simply because companies thought they were bigger than everybody else, and they weren't. So I think, you know, we see the consensus principle at work. Maybe I would suggest less so in IETF. We don't put authors on standards in other SDOs simply because there shouldn't really be one. It should be the work of everybody in the room. Yes, if you sit in the room, you'll see a relatively small number of people actively contribute. There's a lot of spectators and observers in there just making sure that it works for them. But at the end of the day, it is the consensus of the room, because anybody who wants to can push back. And any good standard has probably had hundreds, if not thousands, of people in the room on it. Thank you.
Great. I think I'll just take the comment, and I'd love to hear more about this idea that lighthouse standards don't exist. We can follow up offline.
We have Aijun Wang.
Yeah, I'm from China Telecom. You know, I want to share my thought based on my experience for the IETF. You know, from my application, the China Telecom is always encourage us to attend the IETF because it is open and the standard have the being deployed in the various networks. But now there is a challenge for the current situation because the market is separate now. Normally, in previous year, for example, in previous year, the product of the Cisco device is deployed widely in our network, but currently it is phased out by the Huawei of our China company. So I think this will also influence the cooperation of the China and the West companies, because you know their product cannot be entered into the China market. And on the contrary, US also limited the product from the China to enter their market. So I think this will also influence the cooperation between the two sides. So current situation is, from the service provider, we often find the cooperation from the vendor of the China companies, because we have the same market interest. So I think this is the most important reason for the depart of the standardized activities. But our company always encourage us to attend the, and I think you can now, currently there are several side meetings be held by the operator or company from China. So beside of our company, the other company also are very interested in participating in IETF activities. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point. It goes to Carolina and Drew's point about look at implementation and deployment, because that's also going to influence whether you co-author or not. Let me maybe push back on two things, or maybe let me just push back on one thing. I think you're right that you're seeing more on the government level. For example, China saying indigenous innovation, let's remove Cisco from critical infrastructure. US doing similar things, let's remove Chinese companies from critical infrastructure. That doesn't mean there's a big market outside of just critical infrastructure, number one. Number two is more Chinese companies are trying to expand globally overseas. That's partly why they're becoming more invested in these global standards development organizations. So it's not just about the Chinese market, it's about the Malaysian market and European market. And there's more room, I think, for these sort of cross-country collaborations on the deployment side. At least that would be my initial reaction, but I completely take your point that on the critical infrastructure, you're seeing countries implement these more techno-nationalist policies.
Yeah, sorry, I raised my hand again. I actually did want to make a third point, and this follows from what you said about that slide you had on whether authors from the same country are more likely to collaborate. I also wanted to suggest that may need a bit more nuance. For instance, I think sort of the time that you look at, you said you were looking at 15 years, trends over the last 15 years, I think would be different for different, perhaps, case studies that you're looking at. So maybe say for the new IP would make sense for you to have a look at what happened from 2020 onwards, for example. And the other thing I wanted to highlight in terms of sort of how people collaborate within IETF, I think if you go to sort of the final product, you'll see, people to get, an RFC sort of approved, you have to sort of, work with other folks, but that comes after a lot of work. So I think if you go and look into sort of the earlier process, I don't know, the creation, a side meeting, the creation of a burst of a feather, and you look at how certain streams of work get started in the IETF and what collaboration you see at the beginning, you might see there's a lot more collaboration from, that reflect perhaps the findings from Ignacio's study, right? Collaborations across, sort of, regional groups. In the case of Ignacio's study, I think he showed collaboration of Chinese firms as well. So I think there's sort of a strategy that's pursued. The reasons behind that, you can also sort of research. I think I'd be interested whether that's the fact that they come from the same region, the fact that there's national policy sort of supporting that collaboration, or what it is that it's motivating that. But I feel like the earlier you go into sort of how a standard is born, let's just put it that way, you'll find that there's sort of different dynamics of, country collaboration, if you will. So just offering that thought. Thank you.
Yeah, I think two things. One is on the time span. So I reran the ERGM for just the later period, the last 7 years, and it's the same finding. But point very well taken on in a lot of ways, these RFCs are lagging indicators, right? Sometimes I think in yesterday's presentation, it sometimes takes more than 4 years to actually publish the RFC. So I'm only looking at published RFCs. So yeah, it would be really helpful to look at the earlier, the leading indicators, the side meetings, the BOFs, stuff like that. Those are great suggestions.
One last thing, since we are going down to the segment.
Very brief.
Yeah. I'm on the queue as well. Since we're going down the segmentation road, you may also want to look into exactly which areas in IETF would be corresponding to the proposal from new IP, because you could see, for instance, that maybe they would have been trying to have more influence on SEC or voting, maybe not so much in art. And so the aggregate made move your numbers, but when you look into the specific technology areas, you may observe those concentrations. Thank you.
That's a really helpful comment. I think I was looking at TSV as the closest for new IP, but there probably intersects and overlaps with a lot of different areas.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
Very good presentation. Brian? So now moving on to something else completely different. We are now going to be talking about the AT protocol ecosystem. I think this is a very interesting presentation and a very different one. So we were talking before about how countries collaborate, and now we are going to be talking about how elements are brought to a standardization forum. So Brian.
Cool. I'm Brian Newbold. I work at Blue Sky, which is a company that's been developing a protocol called AppProto. I've been working on this for about 2.5 years. I previously worked at the Internet Archive and met a lot of my current colleagues from this kind of like a distributed web, social web, open social web development kind of community. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, to be clear, like last night we had a side meeting that was more specifically about bringing AppProto to the IETF. We're at a point where we're trying to decide about this, where we haven't like fully committed. We haven't committed to doing a BOF yet, but we're like very interested of like trying to choose a venue and what the path would be, kind of what our strategy, what our timing is, how much of the protocol do we want to bring. So I'll touch on a little bit about that, but that's not the main point here. I'm kind of just on a meta sense going to try to describe what we're thinking about, kind of what the state of interoperation in the AppProto network is in general, how we're thinking about which kinds of venues or why would we want to standardize at all? Do we want to come to a standards body? Do we want to do our own thing? And then touch a little bit on kind of like what other challenges we're seeing with interoperation that maybe don't fit quite under a existing standards body, but might be interesting to people in this kind of venue. So I'll be touching on kind of a bunch of different points, and I'll try to leave time to discuss because I think that'd be the more interesting thing. So this is kind of like just placing where we are and why we're doing what we're doing. Blue Sky was founded to do protocol development in some sense. Like our kind of corporate mission is to improve the status of dialogue and communication on the open web. And a bit of our theory is to develop, start by developing a product, Blue Sky, which has a lot of users, it has a social graph, and it's all open data. And we think that existing community on the net will attract people, developers that want to build tools or build other applications or other products. And that interest will feed into helping support a protocol, AppProto, that would be an interoperable standard. And the more successful the protocol is, the more people that are building on it, the more things that will pull users into using products here. I definitely need to update this slide because it says product and it's really products. There's multiple companies, multiple parties involved, and just kind of build this flywheel up. The more, this is kind of like the entire web is this, right? The more people that are building on the web, the more people that are building on open standards, the more browsers are developed, the more like value there is that attracts people, the more people, the bigger audience, the bigger user base, it just creates this spinning flywheel. So this is kind of our meta theory of what we're trying to do and motivates doing a standard. And it's important to have it all be open and credible and legitimate, that other people would want to build and invest in this ecosystem and kind of like spin this wheel up. Next. I won't get too into the detail, but like a little bit of the background, at least from our standpoint, we think that AppProto builds on a lot of research over the years, but it's fairly distinct from a couple other large protocols. We often call it, the model is being called a like shared heap, where all this content is just kind of put out there on a web, as opposed to message passing. So a lot of successful federated protocols like email or ActivityPub depend on sending specific messages between hosts. that are cooperating. And so the protocol is about what the format of these messages are and how you discover other hosts and send them between each other. In App Proto, things are much more just this like big heap. People publish out into a large commons pool. Anyone can pull from that pool by subscribing to servers and pulling content in. Content can be redistributed between multiple hosts and multiple providers. You don't need to connect directly to the origin host for an individual user. And people can build all kinds of stuff off of it. So it's the data model, the functionality is very similar to a lot of other systems, but the underlying architecture is pretty distinct. We talk about it a lot as being very similar to Git or these kind of like peer-to-peer technologies. We also talk a lot about credible exit in our kind of decentralization strategies to try to ensure that any individual component in the network, any individual service that's being provided to users can be swapped out, and in particular, swapped out in isolation. So you don't need to you don't have to switch service provider for everything you're getting. Like if you're getting reliable hosting, you don't need to switch moderation, or you could switch your hosting. If you like your moderation, you can stick with your moderation, swap out your hosting. So components are kind of like devolved a little bit. Next. We've been at this for a few years. We have written specifications. All of this development to date has primarily taken place within Blue Sky. We hired a small team. This is how we've done it for this one kind of framework of protocols. This obviously is not the only way to go about protocol development, but we have a fairly small team, a handful of people within the company that kind of designed a lot of this together. We have a couple technical advisors like Martin Klipman. We published a few years ago kind of a paper, an academic paper describing this overall architecture. And we've been developing these specifications. And so we're kind of at a crux point, maybe for the last even 6 months or a year, where other people all get into the state of adoption, but we're starting to get more people with opinions about how the system should evolve or problems should be changed. And to be clear, to date, basically this has been the team at Blue Sky. So if people want a change, they come to us, they ask or propose, and we're getting to the breaking point of that. If we want to have a broader network, we need to have a different way of going about kind of like who's developing and standardizing the protocol going forward. So this is maybe interesting. This is just kind of like where the network is at today. Like what's the state of maturity? How many other participants are there? We have these three, I'm not going to dive too into the technical details. We have like 2 or 3 major network components, kind of services. And for each of those, there's completely independent implementations at this point. So like kind of the main user hosting component in the network, we call the PDS, the personal data server. We've got 4 full from scratch re-implementations of that service at this point in different programming languages from different completely independent parties, and those are all operating live in the network. There's 2 full from scratch implementations of the relay role, which is a larger piece of infrastructure that aggregates all the content from the network into WebSockets and streams it around. So those are 2 full from scratch, both operating at full network scale today. And we have just more recently in the last couple of months, someone got a full independent copy of the kind of Blue Sky application specific API server. So that's aggregating all the content from the network and running it. And just giving a couple of numbers earlier on, the way Blue Sky operates many of these network components, we operate them with high availability and distribution and like lots of copies of the server and high performance. But it's becoming much more affordable as engineering's happened. So you can run a full network relay for on the order of $30 to $50 a month. You can run someone's running a full network Blue Sky API server for about $200 a month. So this is like, at least at this size of the network, it's relatively, it's maybe at the upper limit of kind of like an individual hobbyist doing a weekend project, but it's totally accessible to like small companies or small groups of people coming in. So this isn't, a like only, there's a frequent question is like, could anyone else other than Blue Sky who has funding come in and actually credibly provide other infrastructure in the network? And we're trying to show like it wouldn't cost that much to run a complete independent stack and just not interoperate or not depend on the Blue Sky servers, even if you're interoperating with them, to kind of like separate that, sharing data but not being dependent on certain services being provided. We have, there's a couple different implementations of like kind of like SDKs for the building blocks of the protocol. So we have Blue Sky maintains a TypeScript and Go implementation, and the community's been developing a Rust and Python implementation. Earlier this spring, the developer community on their own, without Blue Sky's support, at least initially, like self-organized a developer conference in Seattle. So about 150 developers came. That was both kind of like people developing applications, people building tools on top of the more specific Blue Sky product in the network, as well as people working on lower levels of the protocol. So the folks working on these other PDSs and relay implementations. Just kind of like, I guess, a little bit of a gauge of how big the community's grown at this point in time. A pretty notable, interesting project is BridgeFed, which is it's a bridge between ActivityPub and AppProto. It lets you post or send messages back and forth between the two protocol ecosystems. They're even ambitiously working on a new feature that lets you migrate accounts. So if you have like a AppProto account, you can move through the bridge and have it become a native ActivityPub account and vice versa. And that's operated by a now freestanding independent nonprofit called A New Social. And there's a bunch of apps. So there's apps, Blue Sky is kind of the brand name, maybe the flagship or the most well-known product and application built in the ecosystem. But there's a number of these other companies and applications that are getting built with different modalities. So there are a couple that are somewhat similar or a little integrated with Blue Sky. Two that have gotten venture funding so far are Skylight, which is kind of like a TikTok short video modality. There's Graze.social, which offers custom feed curation services so you can create your own feed and share that with the community. There's a blogging service called Whitewind. There's an event system, kind of like Meetup, called Smoke Signals. There's a photo sharing system, kind of like Flickr, called Grain. And then there's a couple of these, like very interesting to me, there's these other services that are not maybe what you'd initially think of as kind of social web or kind of web 2.0-y things. There's a Git Forge that's kind of like GitHub called Tangle.sh, and there's a live video streaming service called Stream.play. So there's like this set of things. There's like kind of this question is like this whole thing just for microblogging? No, there's these other modalities that people are doing. And is this whole thing even just for kind of social media? I'd say no, there's these other applications that are starting to emerge on the underlying technology. So one question is like, well, this all seems to be going pretty great from our perspective. We're pretty happy. We have a lot of work to do just supporting these folks. A lot of people just want to build on what we're doing, and they want our SDKs to be better. They want our documentation to be better. And we could be just focusing on serving this development kind of in an open software sense, right? If we just think of this whole project as a bunch of software libraries, we could just be collaborating and improving what we're providing out to the community. So there's like, why standardize? Like we have a small team. We're still only 30 people. We only have so many hours. Why would we? What is it about it coming to a standards body that makes this worth it? I'd say the backdrop of this is this isn't anyone's first rodeo in the social media space. There's been many companies that have had these great APIs or great ecosystems with access to tons of users, and you could come in and the rug has been pulled over and over. Everyone is very used to building on and depending on American social media companies and then having the world be pulled out under their feet and their business model's gone or their community gets kind of disrupted. For us, if this whole protocol, this whole framework just ends up being kind of the API to Blue Sky, that's a failure mode. That's not what we're trying to do here. We want to have something like our mission is to have something that's no one company should be running all the social media in the world and the whole network, and we want to have multiple players in it. And so we need to remove ourselves from power and to a degree. And so getting more legitimacy and actual like neutral governance of the protocol is the goal in the long run. So we started in a small group. We want to end up with something that's just how people build things on the internet, at least for some kind of like era. I don't think we've nailed it. This isn't the final word on how to build this kind of network, but we want to get people moved over to building apps in this way. We think some of the kind of like the properties you get, the kind of like bill of rights users get under our protocol, we think are important for people on the web. So that's to get there and to get larger parties to build in, we think we need to make this like credibly neutral. We need to say, we need to show people that we can't pull the rug out under them. So that's one of the big reasons. Another one, there is a lot of expertise within these bodies like the Ietf, especially on concerns like security and how to, we've tried to add extension points to the protocol so that other people can add on to it and build on it without needing to break interoperation of the lower bits. But we're, that's like an emerging art, how to build extensibility into protocols, how to make it more evolvable, so how to have versioning and have these phases where you're upgrading components of the protocol, but you're still backwards compatible, but then being able to roll forward. And just kind of in general, no one on the team's gone through, no one on the team has taken a protocol through the IETF or a body like the W3C. A lot of us have worked on other smaller protocols, but like there's just some craft to this, and we're probably missing some small details. So it'd be great to have another set of eyes on everything. Next, so this is like, as we're thinking about bringing pieces, we have this kind of sprawling framework of components, and we don't want to try to bring the whole thing all at once. It would be a big, be like the boa constrictor eating too large of a meal. It would take a long time to digest. So we're definitely thinking of kind of how to break things up and bring some early components in that would like fit. Some things will fit better at the IETF. Some things might fit better at the W3C. We work with DIDs, which are an identifier scheme. Some of these things like the product level microblogging details, we think probably just won't ever go to a standards body. Those will always be kind of like developed as, left to teams or companies or other kind of like folks building an actual product to work on that. So this is like this kind of lays out, there's like the gray boxes at the top are existing standards that we build on. Some of these we extend a little bit, and there's a clear venue, like we use a particular flavor of CBOR. We can go to the CBOR working group. We don't need to do anything that fancy about that. We can just start posting on the mailing list. Similarly, we're using some kind of like new work from OAuth. So we're doing OAuth 2.1. We use the client metadata spec. Again, we can work with the existing, those aren't hard, right? That's pretty easy to work with the existing groups on that. The bigger things are like bringing our core data structure, which is this Merkle tree repository thing. It's kind of complicated. That's feeling working group size. So some of these kind of the repository and repository sync mechanisms we think would be a good place to start at the IETF. And some of these other things, maybe not, or different venues. So this is kind of just like how we're thinking about standards. Like there's not necessarily going to be one home to bring the whole thing to, but we can break it up into chunks and move it around. This was the final slide of the side meeting yesterday. I'm not going to go through all these. These are just kind of like our questions. I thought this might be interesting in the room. Like this is what this is like my third IETF. We've been kind of thinking about this. I've been doing this research. I've been coming and having conversations with people for a couple of years now. And these are the things that we're still just kind of like thinking through our concerns, right? We hear these, there's stories you can go back and when you come that you're turning over change control, right? And we know that when you come, we're not going to just get rubber stamped. We're going to bring existing work. We have multiple parties in our operating, but we still have to go through a consensus process. We're not going to get it. We won't necessarily have everything exactly as it is in the protocol today get approved. Like we might need to make some changes. And this is just like a fuzzy little scary thing. Like there's certain parts we might be asked to change that would be painful. And so there's just I think there's just a little bit of trust here. There's some wiggle room. And so you can hear stories, some people bring Quick or other protocols in. They had to change a lot. It was years. They had to have multiple versions. But at least even in this week, getting to actually talk to the engineers involved in that process and hear them say like, this was good, like this worked out. It slowed things down, but it was worth it. Like the protocol that came out better, that's like being able to come and have those conversations with the actual people instead of just observing this from afar has been great. We can come back to this if people have questions about it. And then in the last slide, I wanted to touch a little bit. These are some kind of like interoperability or kind of ecosystem challenges these are mostly not like, I think, standards body questions. They are a little bit, and these aren't kind of questions that we would expect the IETF to help us solve, but I just kind of wanted to note them as like challenges as we're getting multiple companies into our network or multiple products and multiple people building things. In some sense, this whole project is a moderation project. Like moderation's kind of the elephant in the room. It's like this very important power structure, trying to improve the state of moderation on the internet, trying to improve like kind of the legitimacy of how moderation is done, that there can be multiple parties involved in it, and there's some accountability and quantification of like who's doing a good job with moderation, and being able to have progress on that over time is one of our big goals. And it's a challenge. We built a decentralized moderation system. It's gotten a lot of feedback. People are interested in it. There's been some adoption. A lot of people are doing small little interesting things with it. But I would say there's not a big, there hasn't been a big peer, right? It's just work. It's hard. Not a lot of people want to do it, and trying to come up with the incentive structure on how to get more people to like more seriously invest in moderation would be great. A lot of the more serious developers we see come in, we're a little worried that like if going back to that first slide with the big flywheel, we're worried that a lot of people are attracted because they perceive that Blue Sky will do all the moderation in the network. So trying to get more people, we've built the system to have multiple parties do it, but getting other people to invest in it is a bit of a challenge. We've built a bunch of extension points in, and how we have this is kind of just like an open research. It's at the schema level, so it's not things that we bring to the IETF, but how to have multiple products and parties work with each other's data without breaking each other, and how to extend in small ways. So a small, like a small client or app could add small features to the Blue Sky modality, for instance, without that breaking interoperation is kind of like an open emerging thing. There's a lot of demand for large protocol features and how we kind of fit that in. So the most notable of this right now is private data in the network, or kind of like group membership primitives, or encrypted DMs. These are big bodies of work. There's a clear demand from developers that they want these features added, but like, how do we sequence these? What's the time urgency of them? That there's a little bit of like governance and, work to be done there. And then there's just kind of scope creep. Some people in our developer community they really love what we've built, and they want it to do everything and solve all problems. And so trying to communicate and keep things a little more focused is a bit of an open challenge for us. So, I hope folks have questions.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions from anyone? Jay?
Brian, thank you for that. There is a spectrum of the way that some modern standards are developed, which is at one end is write all the code first and then document it later, and at the other end is document it and then write the code. Can you explain where you started at on that spectrum, where you are now, and where you think you will be in a few years' time on that spectrum?
It's a good question. When we talk, I make this hand gesture over and over again, where we really want to do product. I guess we don't think of it usually. We think of where writing code happens, but we mostly think of it as product and protocol development happening together. This isn't like directly answering your question maybe, but it's how we think about it. And our approach for this, we don't think it's like the right way to do all of this. But for this set of protocols, we really wanted to ensure that it fit the need of a specific use case, so that it worked. We didn't want to design a protocol all the way through and implement it and then try to build on it. And we also didn't want to build something and then try to build a protocol. We do these together. It's the same individuals work on the product and on the protocol, and we just flip back between meetings. And so we really, we'll make a little bit of progress on adding some new features. To date, we haven't shipped almost anything in the protocol that isn't implemented in the Blue Sky app. And the theory of that is just you learn a little bit when you're actually building and actually deploying it. And in particular, we, to some degree, our audience, frankly, isn't to like standards bodies for designing the whole system. Our audience is developers. We want application developers and the market to adopt this. And so we really want to make sure it doesn't cause them any pain. We don't want them to have to make any compromises. We want latency to be excellent. We want performance to be excellent. We want the SDKs to feel good to use and be relatively tightly integrated. And so we want to be able to, we will like see it working with an application. This has happened a number of times that we've, thought something up on a whiteboard, and then when we actually started integrating it into the application, we're like, oh, that isn't going to work, or this corner case came up, and we can kind of like sand down those rough edges before we actually publish the specification. That's how we've done things to date, and that works well within a single organization. But it can't go forward that way, right? Like we're kind of coming to the end of that era, I think. So we want to kind of get the big ideas and the big structure of things done that way. But then, we don't know what all the possible use cases are we didn't foresee people building a Git issue tracker and kind of discussion forum on top of it. It's worked out well for that, but they're going to have product needs that it's not a perfect fit for, and we need to start integrating that other feedback from other people into it. That was okay.
Thank you, Brian. So one question, you have been coming to the IETF 3 times. You say, I presume you are also quite familiar with W3C and probably other SDOs. I was wondering, like, you are considering whether and what to bring from the AT protocol to an SDO, and you're looking at different SDOs. And I'm quite curious to know how the different elements that differentiate the SDOs weigh in. I presume that you have a process itself, the existing pool of expertise, the ability to bring potential people or organizations that want to do something. So I'm very curious to see how these different elements weigh in and how from different SDOs, what matters to you.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I mean, there's a little bit of just kind of like we're just pattern matching or maybe cargo culting a little bit of looking at what's worked well in the past. We have this schema layer in Proto that has a pretty clear, so there's there's documents and then there's kind of document transport, and that aligns pretty well with the HTTP HTML split. And so like the lower level pieces we think would fit pretty clearly in the IETF, and those parts would not fit well in the W3C, and these kind of more application level things would probably not fit in the IETF. We think they maybe don't even need to go to, like, those maybe will just be left. We have this kind of system for interoperation where people declare their schemas and then they can borrow across them. So there might be someday some of the, it might help to have like a standard blogging thing, but the intent is not to completely standardize each modality. We want to let people kind of mix and match and evolve over time. So there's a little bit of that pattern matching of just like where stuff like this has ended up. I've been pretty, the IETF is very open. It's been a very welcoming community. We don't, there's not this big membership commitment. It's pretty clear what the governance is. It seems to be very technically driven, and those are kind of the values we're looking for. We'd like to be able to bring other people in from our ecosystem, and so having barriers to them come would be kind of a problem. This is like a relatively easy venue for people to drop into and start collaborating. I guess maybe one option for us is like, well, we can make our own standard, and not even really like a standards body, but we can make our own foundation or our own venue to have these discussions in. That's a path a number of other tech companies have taken over time. I think a thing that's like a huge benefit of the IETF is that even the largest corporations in the world don't just get what they want here, right? And we are the path we've fallen. We are really dominating our network and our protocol ecosystem. And so if we want to have a venue where other people can come in and feel like they're actually can participate on a level playing field, I think if we created our own org, it would just be clear, we would be clearly dominating that. It would not be for other people to come in and participate there. It wouldn't be, it's like our house. And so by coming here, we're in a more facilitated playing field. And then we also get to be able to express our opinions, right? If we have strong technical opinions, we can come into the IETF and I can express my personal strong technical opinions without feeling like I'm crushing someone's, feelings, or like that I need to act more neutral, or that I need to act as the facilitator of the space. And that's pretty appealing, that we can come in and just, because we have strong opinions about, the outcomes of how this work will impact society. And we have strong technical, we want things to be relatively elegant, and it's nice to have a venue that we can come into and express those openly.
Yeah, thank you. The home of strong technical opinions definitely seems to be this one. Karina, briefly.
Yeah, no. So I think you said you had a site meeting yesterday and you posed that question, should we bring this work to the IETF? I was wondering what the outcome of that site meeting was and what people said in response to that question. And if I may quickly, as a suggestion, I think perhaps a good starting point might be the hackathon for you guys. I don't know if you consider or already done something at the hackathon, but bringing, some of the questions you're trying to answer that you think could benefit from sort of the collective thinking at IETF, and having that run at the hackathon. I think that might give you some answers to the questions you're asking.
Yep. To run it backwards, I was at the hackathon this past week, and I've been participating in the AI preferences working group. And so I did a demo of showing how to integrate kind of the AI preferences work into App Proto. And that, as much as anything, that was very good networking. It's a great way to have just kind of informal conversations or be introduced to other people. So that I'm a big supporter of the hackathon venue within the venue of the IETF. The feedback, I mean, we've both got feedback I would say the feedback in the side meeting was pretty positive, and that this can probably work, and that the way we laid things out probably makes sense. I think that was kind of the overall feedback from that. We certainly, there's a lot of people at the IETF. We've had a lot of one-on-one conversations in the hallway, and we get different, some people are very enthusiastic about it. Some people think that we should just keep doing what we're doing and wait a little longer. Some people, there's a lot of different opinions, and we're trying to gauge the shape of the whole thing.
Great, thank you so much. We need to move on because we have one more presentation. So yes, sorry. So we have the last presentation. Kareem is remote. Kareem, if you're hearing us, you can go ahead and turn your microphone on, and if you want to put your camera on, that's fine too. Kareem? He's online. We just
He was here before.
Yes. He's in the islands of Comoros in southeast Africa. So we hope that he can come through. Oh, here we go.
Hello, everyone.
Yes.
Hi, we can hear you. You're a little low in your the volume of your speaker. You can maybe get a little bit closer. We're running a little bit late. Sorry about that, but there you go. We can see you. And I believe you should have control of the slides too.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my research remotely. And it's a real pleasure to be able to contribute from remote. I'm presenting you. Do I have? Okay, it's okay. So I start with the snapshot. We have only 0.24% of IFC have African cohorts, and during our African AGF discussion, we realized and we tried to understand why African are not well represented on IETF discussion and activities. And we noticed some barriers regarding geographic, linguistic, and structural. And I'm proposing metrics, policy aware development, and research to see how we can address the gap. Next, okay. Why this matters? We all know that internet standards. Okay, it's go. Come back. Okay, internet standards shape global digital infrastructure, and as said below, African underrepresented in authorship and influence, and participation is tied to visibility and access. We noticed that all meetings were happen in Europe, in United States, and in Asia, and for now we never had the opportunity to have an IETF meeting in Africa, and we gonna understand if it has a real impact on the issue. And yes, geographic, in terms of geographic meetings, mostly, as I said, in US and EU, high cost to attend and visa requirements. In terms of linguistic issues, English dominant documentation, lack of translation, and in the structural side, low awareness in African academia and policy. And this is something very important, as most of people might want to have something from ITF. But if we take a look in our side, if I can say in Africa, I think that we have a lot of things to do to be able to be on the table on the internet governance area. And we need to prepare people, we need to prepare academia, we need to prepare youth to be interested on such work and be able to participate. We will see after barrier in terms of participation, but it's important to highlight this low awareness in this area such as academia and the policy. What do we propose? We propose at regional participation starts by recording mailing lists and authorship, but also meeting attendance and travel grant usage, translation and localization efforts. For now, I had the opportunity to go in Bangkok. I didn't hear any translation, so we might see how we can bring such initiative in terms of translation on ITF works. But the outreach program result tracking, we need to see also for any action we might put on the table, how it will bring results. And in terms of policy, our protocol development, we might encourage inclusion in working group chartering stage, support multilingual summaries of draft, track and promote author diversity. I'm especially interested on the multilingual aspect. Now we are proposing to start make some translation of existing RFC, because when we will need to involve our academia, we need to bring ITF works in universities and try to show people that RFC, to demystify what is ITF works. So I think that if we can get support in multilingual summaries of existing draft and RFC, this could help also address the issue. What do I think in terms of role of RSPG? It could be a study participation as a research question, pilot inclusive outreach experiments, compare Africa and Latin America approach, but we can also try to highlight what happened from Africa and Latin America versus United States and Europe. But during discussion with the chair, Alvaro, I also understand that, for example, a country like India have a lot of participation, but we never had a meeting in India. So I think that the local implication of academia and youth might be could be a good starting point, because the organization of an ITF meeting in a country or in a continent is not the whole key issue, but we need, in my humble opinion, to work on the ground to have academia and those who could join the ITF meeting and activities to understand and be well prepared to to come and contribute. And bridge research and standard development. In terms of next step, as I said, ground engagement in Africa. During last African IGF, we come out with the resolution to say that we need to start engagement at grassroots level. We can't say it's in ITF to come to Africa, but we need to prepare ourselves to be able the year when an ITF meeting will come to Africa, but to find that people are well prepared, are working on it, and focus on African academia and youth community is a key point for me. In terms of goal, we have to demystify the ITF and its relevance to local digital future. We need to outreach, education, community forums, ITF tutorial. We can bring it, for example, on Internet Society chapter to start on this side, and we can spread it on country and continent. And in terms of long-term vision, we have to enable African institutions to actively engage with and contribute to ITF standard. I have an idea, for example, on some university, we have to, most of university, we have to publish scientific article to be able to get a PhD. Why we could encourage people who can have an RFC published to have the same value like a scientific article. I think that we need to create a dynamic that can bring academia to well embrace ITF activities, because my small experience was to see that it's the industry, it's the big company who must support engineer to come and develop protocol. But I think that in some area, if we could give the same value, if we can give the same value on a draft and RFC, because we know that an internet draft can ask a lot of time to be developed and become an RFC. But how we can valorize, how we can give value on ITF academia work to those who can rely on that and get diploma.
Hi, Mohammed. Sorry to interrupt. We are approaching towards the end of the session, and there is another one. So it would be great if you could wrap up relatively fast so we can have time for a few questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm almost finished. And this is, I can skip this one. I already talked about this. And just to conclude, Africa and other region underrepresentation is real and solvable. Inclusive standard require deliberate efforts, and I think that is the good place that we can incubate research and collaborate. Let's build together toward equitable participation. And for your information, I start with some work. I start with an internet draft. You can have the link, and that's it. To allow for question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karim, for the presentation. Questions, comments? I know we have some more people coming into the room for the meeting at 11. We might take a couple of minutes off your session. Carolina.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Karen, so much for this presentation. I'm Argentinian, and I think some of the issues that you're encountering for the African region also apply for Latin America. I always give people the example, there was an IETF that happened in Buenos Aires and not a lot of Argentinians showed up. even though it was, in the country because, a number of reasons, people not knowing, or perhaps not fully understanding what IETF does. The price of just signing up for the event, being, high and so forth. So I think to me, and I've given this a lot of thoughts, a lot of thought. I think there's something to do with sort of the economics of participation that generates a very sort of concrete barrier that I think it's great that IETF does discuss as a community. So I'm excited to see you created an internet draft. I think to me, because it is the question of, money at the end of the day or availability of funding, I've also sort of reflected on the question of who needs to sort of support representatives from Global South. I think there's a very concrete opportunity for organizations from the internet's technical community that do have resources that, oftentimes come from the regions. And I'm thinking of, the regional internet registries. I'm thinking of ICANN, the Internet Society, which in the past have had programs to support fellows, still have some programs, say in the context of IETF, but I think there's a conversation to be had about what support those organizations can provide. And I also think large companies that are present in Africa, are present in Latin America, and are original from those regions, also need to sort of step up. I think many of those do have the bandwidth to support people, to come to spaces like IETF. And I think there needs to be a bit of sort of awareness raising done with those stakeholders that are in, financial capacity of, sending people from those regions. Lastly, I also wanted to say that in sort of unrelated feedback to the Global South that I've done on standards participation, one of the issues that came up as a barrier is the fact that there's some clear pathways leading into standards. I feel like if we ask around the room how we ended up coming to IETF, people will have very sort of different stories, and maybe a lot of us didn't think we would end up, becoming IETFers of any kind. And I think that lack of a clear career pathway becomes, or especially a challenge or a barrier in the context of Global South. So I think you're right on point, highlighting that working through research communities, we can start getting people into spaces like IETF. So yes, and that was my last point. Sorry to take so long. Really passionate about this issue. I'm happy to chat more offline.
Thank you. So we have Colin. As you can see, Karim, on your video, there's a lot of people waiting for the next meeting. I know they're also very interested in IETF participation, but we're going to wrap it up with Colin real quick.
Yeah, Colin Waller, UKNCSC. Thanks, Karim. Really important topic. I think Carolina briefly touched on this in her words, but you've talked in your slides about trying to get academia and policy people engaged in the IETF. Vast majority of people in the IETF are from industry, and the same is true for the vast majority of standards bodies generally. It's industry participation that drives the work and drives the deployment of the results. What work are you doing to look at what industry is up to and engage with companies in either in Comoros or Africa more widely?
Colin? Do Colin intervene?
There was a question, if you can answer very briefly, because now we really need to go.
Okay. Yeah. I would say that the intervention you made, I think that I had the opportunity to come to IETF Bangkok from an ISOC fellowship, and I think that it was really an opportunity. But now I think that it will be hard to find a lot of people to go on IETF meeting. We need to start ground, and I think that the strategy will be to work with academia, with research. We need to demystify IETF activities by try to interest the youth and academia, and I think that it could be the key on how we can shape this issue, because if we come to ITF, we need to come with something, and that need to be well prepared before. And for example, now I can participate remotely, but when I come for my first meeting, I met people, I connected with people, and it helped me working on something and be able to contribute. So we need to balance both sides. It's like giving hands. We need two hands from local grounds and from the ITF also to be able to work together to address the issue.
Thank you very much, Karim, and thank you very much to everybody. Apologies for running late to the next session, and let's keep talking. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all.